When you think of the biggest challenges in Pokemon, you probably have your mind on Cynthia or Red, but hardly ever can Wild Pokémon cause serious trouble. And that made me wonder, what even are the strongest Wild Pokémon in every game? I don't think I've heard anyone talk about that, so how about we do so today? Before we dive in, 2 key rules. 1. While levels are of course a big tell about what the strongest Wild Pokémon is, there are some exceptions. For example, for generations on end now, we've been able to catch Magikarp at level 100, but even at the max of its power, Magikarp is nothing to fear. Even stat-wise, so not counting its lackluster move pool, most fully evolved Pokemon are about as strong as Magikarp when they're around level 50 or 60. So point being, while levels are a big factor, the internet strength of a Pokemon definitely plays a big role as well. Second, in order to qualify as a wild Pokemon, the encounter has to be repeatable, meaning that one-time legendaries or other special encounters do not qualify. With that said, let's get started on the Game Boy with Red and Blue. And yes, since level tables are more or less changed for every single revisit to a region, with one exception, we will be separating third versions and remakes from the originals for this video. Anyone who has ever played a Kanto game will know that when you're talking about the strongest wild Pokemon in the game, you have to look at Cerulean Cave, the only post-game area the region has to offer. And indeed, this is where the strongest Pokemon of the vast majority of the Kanto-based games is found. In the original Red and Blue, the highest level is hit by Ditto, which can reach up to level 67. However, since Ditto isn't really that strong a Pokemon, or at least it's not consistently the strongest, I think a strong case can also be made for Parasect and particularly Raichu, which are found in Cerulean Cave at level 65, so only a little lower. I'd give the title to Raichu personally, which would also be a very poetic winner for Yellow, but unfortunately the third version of Gen 1 shuffles the levels around a bit and most importantly removes Raichu from Cerulean Cave altogether. Ditto is still the objective winner, with a somewhat lower peak of level 65, but that's still the highest in the region. The new runner-up is now Rhydon at level 62, and since I'd say a level 62 Rhydon is probably stronger than a level 65 Ditto, I would consider the Rhydon population of Cerulean Cave to be the strongest wild Pokemon found in Yellow's Kanto. We continue with Gold and Silver, games notorious for their level scaling with wild Pokemon that rarely ever hit high levels. The sole exception is Mount Silver, and even there the wild Pokemon don't come close to the Ditto of Cerulean Cave we saw in Gen 1. The highest level Pokemon found in the wild in the original 2 games are Golduck and Golbat, both at level 51 in Mount Silver. Considering that starting in this generation, Golbat isn't even a final evolution anymore, I'd give the crown to Golduck here. Despite Crystal actually upping the highest levels found in Johto, fun fact, it is actually the only game in the entire Pokemon series that doesn't have a single catchable Pokemon above level 60 at all, counting legendaries. Ho-Oh and Lugia are the highest leveled, but were lowered from Gold and Silver from level 75 to level 60. But anyway, those don't count for the purpose of this video, so instead we return to Mount Silver, where Golbat has shaken off Golduck to become the sole winner now at level 53. Parasect can also be found at level 52, so that's very close, but I wouldn't say Parasect is significantly stronger than Golbat, so to the surprise of everyone, the strongest wild Pokemon of Crystal isn't even fully evolved. Fitting for Johto, I'd say. When we get to Gen 3 and Ruby and Sapphire, we get the first time in the series where my job is made easy. It took years and years, but for the first time, the highest level wild Pokemon in the region is one that's actually decently strong. Found in Sky Pillar are the highest leveled Pokemon in the game, with Altaria being the only one that breaks through that magic number of 60, and therefore is the clean winner for our first visit to Hoenn. But as easy as Ruby and Sapphire were, Emerald is a whole lot trickier, with probably the most pathetic winner of the entire series. So, Sky Pillar is now made available before the league, Rayquaza being the box legendary and all, which has in turn made all the levels fall off a cliff. Now, only 2 regular wild Pokemon still hit level 50, but both are, let's say they're not up to par. The Smeargle in Artisan Cave can go up to level 50, and while I guess Smeargle can be strong in the right hands, Wild Smeargle definitely are not. The Wynot of Mirage Island can also go up to level 50, but not only will you probably never find them, they're also literal baby Pokemon, so they're not a challenge either. And that leads us to the bronze medalist, who I guess now might win the title, being the level 45 Wilmer you can find on Hoenn's many water routes. Probably stronger than Smeargle and Wynot still, but far from a threat regardless. If we go even further down the list, we find a level 44 Medicham found in Victory Road, which I guess is now the eventual winner here. But not only is this the first time so far that a Pokemon available before the league ends up winning, it's also, spoiler alert, the lowest level Pokemon to do so in the entire series. For FireRed and LeafGreen, we return to Kanto, and while these games do now have a few post-game areas on the Sevi Islands, the highest levels are still found in Cerulean Cave. And yes, Ditto still reigns supreme, now going as high as 67. Although it does have to share its title, with the local Kadabra also reaching that level. Since neither is a powerhouse, I would say that perhaps the true strongest wild Pokemon of the region is actually the Electrode found in Cerulean Cave, which max out at level 64, but are probably infinitely stronger than Ditto or Kadabra, I think. Next up, Diamond and Pearl, as well as Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which are such faithful remakes they have the exact same highest level Pokemon. This is the first time where the answer to that question is technically Magikarp, available at level 100 in plenty of games starting with Diamond and Pearl. But as mentioned before, a level 100 Magikarp still isn't the strongest, meaning we look at the many other post-game areas Sinnoh has to offer to find the true winner hidden away in Turnback Cave. Golbat, Haunter, Solrock and Lunatone all reach up to level 66, but the strongest here is probably Bronzong, I would say. Good typing, good moveset, and at the highest level in the game, I'd say it wins fair and square. In Platinum, we find a similar situation to what happened in Emerald. Turnback Cave is now visited much earlier, just like Sky Pillar was, and has its levels reduced accordingly, meaning that now the strongest Pokemon are found in the Battle Zone. Various water Pokemon here could already be found at level 55 in Diamond and Pearl, and now that Turnback Cave has been nerfed, they climb up to take Platinum's top spot. The strongest of these water dwellers is 100% Gyarados, as found on several routes in the Battle Zone, so that's the winner for Platinum only. Just like with FireRed and LeafGreen, the next set of remakes also have us treading familiar ground. In HeartGold and SoulSilver, the strongest Pokemon Johto has to offer are once again found in Mount Silver, with a faithful recreation of the original two games and not the increased levels seen in Crystal. In fact, Golbat once again is the highest level Pokemon of the region and once again at level 51, just like in Gold and Silver. But this time around, using the Hoenn sound, Absol can also be found here at that level. I don't think there is a staggering difference between the two, but for the sake of diversity, let's give Absol the crown for HeartGold and SoulSilver. When looking at Pokemon Black and White, we find a similar situation as was introduced in Diamond and Pearl, except now on steroids. Once again, you can use the Super Rod to fish up some extremely high-leveled water Pokemon. These can reach as high as level 70, the highest in the series yet. Examples include Dewgong in the Giant Chasm, Poliwrath in Victory Road, and definitely the winner, Dragonite in Dragon Spiral Tower. It is incredibly rare, only a 1% in rippling water, but hey, it's a pseudo-legendary, it doesn't get much stronger than that. And then we have Black and White 2, which has one wild Pokemon that is so famous and unique that I'm willing to bet you've heard of it before. In the Nature Reserve, only accessible after you've seen every single Pokemon in the Pokédex, you can again use your Super Rod on rippling water for a 1% chance to catch a level 100 Gyarados. No more Magikarp, Gyarados is now also available, and of course is then easily the strongest wild Pokemon the game has to offer. In fact, seeing as no other wild Pokemon beyond Magikarp has ever hit the maximum level, this Gyarados is without a doubt the strongest wild Pokemon in the entire series. And the drop-off is sharp. We go from the strongest wild Pokemon ever in Black and White 2 to the only game in Pokemon history where the highest level wild Pokemon is obtainable before the Pokemon League. X and Y. Since this game basically has no post-game whatsoever, the levels do not get any higher than those found in Victory Road. A ton of Pokemon found here peak at level 59, which is still decent, despite being pre-league, and I didn't have to think hard about which of these Pokemon is the strongest. Hydreigon can be found swooping down from the ceiling and is therefore easily the most powerful Pokemon found in Kalos. Remakes in Pokemon tend to be quite faithful to the originals, and Oras is no exception, as any fan of the Battle Frontier knows. But in terms of level scaling, Oras actually resembles Emerald more closely than it does Ruby and Sapphire. So while the strongest Pokemon is still found in Sky Pillar, the levels we're talking about here are a far cry from the level 60 Altaria. Instead, we're dealing with a level 46 Mawile, Ariados, Sableye, and yes, once again, Golbat. Who knew this guy was such a consistent threat? But I would say the strongest is probably Claydol. A level 46 Claydol is hardly a threat, that's for certain, and yet it is still the strongest Pokemon found in 3D Hoenn. Not exactly a region of danger in that regard. Alola, on the other hand, follows modern trends of higher leveled wild Pokemon a lot better. In the original Sun and Moon, the place to find the strongest the region has to offer is of course Pony Island, with specifically Pony Gauntlet hitting the highest highs. Several Pokemon reach level 59, and while these Mon themselves aren't very strong, they can call allies with the same levels, and through those means, the winner ends up being the Dragonite that can be called by a level 59 Dratini. If we consider that to be cheating, which it isn't, but alright, then the winner would be Togekiss, which is available once every week through Island Scan. And if we consider that cheating as well, then finally we end up at Beware, still at level 59 and readily available right from the grass, no funny business. Ultra Sun and Moon makes finding Pokemon higher than level 59 quite easy. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of level 60 Mon in the Ultra Space Wilds, for example. However, Pony Gauntlet also has been adjusted alongside these changes, meaning this area now has Pokemon up to level 66, meaning it still houses the best Alola has to offer. The key difference is though that this level is now only hit by Barboach and Dratini, both of which can call help from similarly leveled Whiscash and Dragonite, meaning that now there is no way around it, Dragonite wins again. Boy, I wonder who the strongest Pokemon in Let's Go is. Yeah, okay, it's Dragonite again. A huge number of Pokemon found in the Switch version of Kanto hit the maximum wild Pokemon level of 56, which is interestingly enough lower than any other Kanto game before it. Of this enormous group, Dragonite is probably the strongest as the region's pseudo-legendary, but I do want to highlight that for this game and this game only, actual legendaries qualify. Moltres, Zapdos and Articuno can be found repeatedly above plenty of Kanto's routes, just like Dragonite by the way, meaning they're really just rare wild Pokemon here and qualify to be picked. And while I personally would probably rather have Dragonite on my team, I'd say we can turn a little blind eye and give the crown here to the legendary birds, who are also level 56. Dragonite has won enough, let's give this one to Zapdos, Moltres and Articuno. And then we arrive at the dawn of the open world formula, with Sword and Shield, which didn't yet go all out, but did hide its highest level Pokemon in the open zones, like the wild area and the DLC locations. Because the levels in these areas scale to your number of badges and whether you've beaten Leon, many Pokemon can be found at the exact same high levels at the end of the game, with the Wanderers usually being a few levels higher. Wanderers can only be caught or defeated once per day, but they do continuously respawn over time, so I think they qualify for this video and are fair game. In the wild area, a ton of Wanderers reach up to level 65 max, the strongest of which is probably the Hatterene found near the Lake of Outrage. This is as such the strongest wild Pokemon in the base game, but the Crown Tundra has higher levels to offer and interestingly enough has more differences between each individual Wanderer. Only one Wanderer in the entire region of Galar hits level 70 and is as such the strongest the region has to offer. And that Pokemon is Dragonite again. The Wandering Dragonite of Balamir Lake is a few levels higher than other pseudo-legendaries who can be found in the region, like Garchomp, Metagross and Salamence, all of which don't get past level 68. So yeah, Dragonite may have never had a Mega or another special form, but it has for some reason consistently been the strongest wild Pokemon in a ton of different regions. But it isn't in Legends Arceus, so we finally have a new winner. Since this game technically doesn't have a post-game and you can catch every single Pokemon without battling them, this is probably the game where you can catch the strongest Pokemon in the region the earliest. As long as you have access to the Crimson Mirelands and space-time distortions can appear, I believe you've hit the requirements, as the strongest Pokemon found here is Hisuian Typhlosion, which can very rarely spawn at level 91, the second highest in the entire Pokemon series, Magikarp notwithstanding. Since it's a starting Pokemon, usually among the strongest normal Pokemon as well, I think this is a very deserved winner. But if you find that encountering it proves too time consuming, you might also be satisfied fighting the powerful runner-up, which is Rhyperior. Found in space-time distortions in the Cobalt Coastlands, this one goes up to 90, one level lower, but it is a lot more common than Typhlosion is. And finally we have Scarlet and Violet, the first true open world Pokemon game. Unlike Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet's wild Pokemon levels don't scale, which means that in order to find the best of the best, we definitely have to look at the DLC areas. Those are effectively the new post-game after all. What is similar to Sword and Shield though is the role of the Wanderer, now taken up by the wild Terra Pokemon that are significantly higher leveled than most wild Pokemon around them. And I have to say, this surprised me massively, but the highest leveled wild Pokemon in these games is a level 86 Lampent, found at the Infernal Pass in Kitakami. But hey, that's a Lampent, it's not strong at all, so what is a runner-up? Well, another quite surprising one, a Hakamoa found in Oni Canyon at level 78. But from there it's a short way down to a treasure trove of powerful Pokemon. The strongest I'd say is probably the Glimmora found in Crystal Pool at level 76. I do think it's really interesting though how I've now only mentioned Pokemon from Kitakami, despite the Blueberry Academy being the true final DLC, and thus you would expect it to have higher leveled Pokemon, but it doesn't. Now, the Area Zero Underdepths do have for example a Garchomp at level 80, but that one isn't repeatable, so it doesn't count. Meaning that for me, the final winner of this video is Glimmora. Did you ever encounter any of these wild Pokemon yourself and did they give you trouble? Or did another wild Pokemon manage to mess you up? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokemon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.